Welcome back, listeners, to another exciting episode of Mind Over Matter, the podcast where we explore the paths to a more fulfilling and balanced life, personally and professionally as well. I'm your host, Sana, and today we have an extraordinary guest with us for a conversation that is going to be filled up with many insights about leadership. Mary Harris. Well, listeners, Mary is a core energy coach dedicated to transforming the way women understand and use their energy, enabling them to flourish in all of their roles. She helps talented, frazzled women move from a state of overwhelm, confusion, to one of vibrant, thriving energy with clarity. Well, so Mary, welcome to the show, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you here today with us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Uh, Mary, starting from your own journey, such an incredible journey from mechanical engineering to now core energy coaching. What was that inspiration or catalyst behind making this significant career shift?
Well, lots of things, I think, but the main one really, I think, was becoming a parent. So, I had a career which was very varied. I traveled, I worked in different countries, and I've always been ambitious, I would say. And then, first, actually, before having my daughter, I became a stepmom. So I've been a stepmom for a couple of years, and then I had a child, and that kind of roller coaster of taking on a different role, suddenly priorities being so different from how they were before, being exhausted as well, which goes with both pregnancy and having a young child. It just turned so many things completely on their head that kind of my old way of doing things just didn't really work anymore. And that's really quite hard to get your head around, because at first it's like, okay, well, it's normal that this is different because I'm pregnant, or now it's normal that it's different because my baby is still very young. And then it goes on, and then, well, hang on, maybe actually there's a different way of doing this from the one I'm doing it. It's just that I haven't actually figured out what that is yet. And that's kind of what happened to me.
No, I mean that's really fascinating, Mary, because it sounds like your journey has been filled with the transformative moments, where you had that moment where you solidified your decision to pursue coaching. So for a listeners who might be considering, just a question, maybe from your journey, who might be considering a career change in their lives as well, what advice would you give to them, to start exploring new paths? Because sometimes, it can be really very overwhelming, confusing. I mean, they wouldn't know what they wish to do, but they really want to do a career change. So what advice would you give them?
Yes, great question. Yes, if I look back to my example, in retrospect, I was very focused on the fact that it was my work that needed to change. In the end, in going through that process, I also changed all sorts of other areas of my life. It's never quite as simple as, well, simple, not that it's simple, that it's never one thing. But what helped me, because I started off trying to do everything on my own. And I read a book, and I had a whole idea about what I wanted to do. And then it was, can I actually really do this? And so I worked with a coach. She helped me through, as it turns out, quite a deep internal exploratory process. But part of that was also to clarify what I really wanted to do, which is how I got to coaching. And then there's sort of actually doing it. And then that's another whole process. So I found out as much as I could about it. I then did while still working in the job that I already had, I then did a training course. I met other people who were already coaching. And then I also got quite a bit of business advice and business training before I took the leap. And I think it's important so I'm someone who's always kind of leapt into things quite quickly. So it was actually quite unusual for me to take as much time over making the transition. But I'm so glad I did, because there are so many parts to it. And I think it's important to experiment with them first, really get a feel and a taste for them before taking a leap, because, of course, lots of things look attractive from the outside, and they really can be. But it's also quite a roller coaster, this kind of change. So getting support, I would say, and talking to people who are doing it, and being supported along the way is really, really important.
I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. It can be really, really, sometimes, yes, it can, give us that sense of fear and, testing unknown waters. But, of course, failure definitely somewhere down the line, it will lead to success. So,
Mm.
the point of blocking ourselves, pushing back ourselves to explore. So great, great, Mary. Moving on. Moving on to core energy coaching. So it's such a unique, different kind of approach. So for our listeners, can you explain what it is and how it differs from other coaching methods, specifically for leadership or something like that?
Yeah, with pleasure. So it's not something that I've invented, even if I've given it my own flavor. So there were kind of two different places that led me to this. So one was a book called The Power of Full Engagement, which talks about kind of performance in. So it starts off talking about working with professional sports people and an approach that the two writers of the book had in developing professional sports people. And then they started looking at, well, how do we actually use this with people who are working and in a corporate landscape or in an entrepreneurial landscape? How do you actually apply that to leadership and the way you lead in work and in life? And then when I was looking around for coaching training, I was then very attracted to the course that I took, which is run by an organization called IPEC. And they've developed this approach called core energy coaching. And it's all about talking about, well, what is the kind of energy that I'm bringing to a situation? And there's an energy scale from at the bottom being in a kind of victim mode, in a space where we kind of can't see solutions and we feel like everything is happening to us, all the way up to level 7, which is all about there's such an ease because we are so connected with everything that's happening, that everything comes much more easily. And of course, in between there are different places we can be, and really getting to grips with that idea and this model of energy is just really, really fantastic for exploring your leadership. And what's also amazing and appeals to me as well, coming from an engineering and a more scientific background, is it's something that's measurable. So we can actually, with this tool called the ELI that I work with, can really measure someone's energy or even a group's energy. And based on that, start to explore, okay, what's working, what's not working, where are things blocked? How do we move that energy up the scale to really make it work better for someone? So it's a fantastic tool. And then, yes, it goes into all sorts of other dimensions depending on how much you'd like to explore. But I love this way of talking about something that seems very intangible, or even for some people quite woo-woo, which is energy. And actually saying, okay, no, it's something we can actually measure and get our heads around and work with to improve our leadership.
Well, that sounds fascinating. So, does it mean that, the soft skill, for example, let's say we talk about vulnerability or authenticity or a kind of EQ a leader should have effectively managing, their organization or their people, or, whatever endeavors they're putting into, those can be measurable or,
Yes, to a certain extent. So the idea is, well, first of all, if we don't really know what's going on with ourselves, the whole question of being vulnerable or authentic or leading other people effectively is going to be very difficult if we don't have that awareness first. So the tool is certainly going to open up a lot of things and give someone that awareness. And then understanding why, because I mean, we all have, so we call it in this approach catabolic energy. So this is energy, as I mentioned, around perhaps feeling helpless, but also things like anger, frustration, those come up for everybody. So starting to understand when and where those come up and why, and all sorts of things. I mean, we all have our history. We all have the different reasons why we see the world the way we do. Exploring those and unblocking some of those things is really quite an essential step before we can then start saying, okay, well, how then am I interacting with other people and how do I bring their energy higher? So all that sort of emotional intelligence that we talk about then becomes much more accessible. But first, there's a personal exploration, and it's amazing how much more we understand other people as well when we start understanding ourselves a little bit better. It's, why does this person keep reacting in this way? And it's like, well, what am I actually saying, and how am I behaving, first of all? And that might already explain quite a lot about what's happening with the other person.
No, that's understandable. Makes sense, Mary. So, uh, it's really amazing to hear how core energy coaching can lead to profound personal growth. So, I really imagine that understanding one's energy, it can really open up new possibilities for success, whether at an individual level or maybe at an organizational level. So moving on, Mary. Many people they struggle with feeling overwhelmed and burnt out. How does core energy coaching help individuals move from that state of being overwhelmed to one of thriving energy?
Great question, because burnout is a very, very big issue. And overwhelm, I think, for a lot of people is a sort of semi-permanent state of being sometimes. So, yes, as I mentioned before, there's this first part about awareness, starting to realize why these different things are happening and coming up, and why, because when we're talking about burnout and overwhelm, we're in that catabolic energy that I described. So energy that just drains us, that doesn't help us see opportunity, feel spacious, feel like we can actually find solutions. So that's a first step. And I think really the thing about burnout, the thing that I keep seeing when I work with people, burnout is so much about unresolved issues, frustrations, emotional challenges. There's an energy level that we talk about, level 3, which is just out of this catabolic zone, which is about pushing through. It's like things aren't kind of okay. There's maybe something I haven't resolved, but I'm just going to push on through. And that, for me, is where burnout is born. So there are things I haven't resolved. I keep driving forwards, and I'm being apparently quite effective, productive. So maybe everything's okay. And then sooner or later, all those unresolved issues and sources of stress, well, they just accumulate, and it comes back and turns into something that looks like burnout. So really identifying as well where that level 3 energy is happening. Where am I pushing things to one side and just forging ahead anyway? That's what will really expose those issues, and those are the ones to start addressing, to actually create this space, build the energy, and then start reducing overwhelm and not fall into the burnout trap.
And can you also share a success story of a client, or any women to be particular, who experience significant transformation through this approach?
Absolutely, yes. So there's someone I'm still working with now, who is someone who has been extremely successful in her career. She has brought up her kids. They're now older, and they're either left home or sort of in the process of leaving home. And she had her life very focused on both what she needed to deliver for work, being a mother, and there was sort of no space really anymore, or hadn't been for a long, long time, for sort of her, she is. And by going through this process together, we exposed a certain number of, it's what I was describing, this level 3, a certain number of issues that have come up over the last several years that hadn't really been addressed, because she was someone very focused on moving forwards. I'm not going to, people say there's a lot, wallow in self-pity. I'm just going to get on with things. But in the end, those things end up kind of showing up or blocking you in terms of your capacity to see what else could be possible or what the future might hold. So we worked on a lot of those things. And now she's in love with the process. So she said, okay, well now I'm seeing what life has in store and where I could go. I want more. So, how much better could it be? So we've kind of moved from this place of pushing through, getting on with things, doing what's necessary, and not so much kind of joy or fun or taking time, into something where she's already taking more time for herself. She's created more space in her work for what's important, and leaving space for herself and what she needs. And now we're kind of exploring, well, where else can she go with that in the future? And there's and people around her, she tells me, are can see the transformation, and she just feels so much more vibrant than she did before. And as I said, it just opens up your mind to, okay, well, what else is possible now that I'm here, which I think
That
is
is
beautiful.
really, really empowering. Very, very empowering to, listen to these transformative stories, success stories. And, it really shows the unique benefits of core energy coaching in helping people regain their vitality, Mary. So thank you so much for. Um,
Pleasure.
so you have worked extensively with women in various roles. Of course, we are cognizant of some of the core challenges women face, specifically, juggling between their career, their personal lives, and a lot of societal stigma, expectations. So, in your experience, what are some of the common challenges uh, you have seen they are facing, and how does core energy coaching address these challenges?
Yes, great question. And I could talk for a long time about some of these, but I would say, the things that come up over and again for women are things that you touched on. There's a kind of expectation which can come from society, it can come from the way we were brought up, it can come from the people around us about how it is that we should be as mothers, as professionals, and this sort of, oh yes, but if I didn't have a job, I could be this perfect mother, and if I wasn't a mother, I could be this perfect professional. But I'm always kind of a sort of imperfect version of both, and a constant kind of striving to be better at both, and feeling like you're constantly failing. And it comes from these expectations. So, and it's like, where on earth have these come from? Why do I have to, what are they really mine? Where have they come from? And it can be quite complicated to unpick those, especially as some of them really come from, very early childhood ideas that we've developed about, how we should do things, and accepting the idea that there is, only our own way of doing things. There is no one right way. There's our way. But figuring out what that is, and which of all these things from the expectations and beliefs that we have picked up along the way, which ones are actually important to us and which ones are just things we've picked up which actually don't work for us at all, that can be quite complicated. But entirely possible, of course. And the other one is about boundaries. There's a very common and very female tendency, which is to say yes to too many things and feel like if we say no to people that we will, I don't know, be seen badly, hurt people's feelings. It might feel quite culturally not acceptable. And it just creates this situation of there being too many things, tolerating situations that are not okay. And then not being able to deal with them. So I'd say those two are very, very common. And so quite often those are the things that I work with people on quite extensively, because usually what's behind all that, as I said, is a whole lot of history or ideas about who we should be, and kind of breaking that down and figuring out actually who do we want to be, is really the most important thing. But until that's clear, it's very then difficult to say, am I saying yes to this because I want to, or because it's what somebody else wants, or it's what I think the school expects of me because I'm a parent, or my work expects of me because, and so on. And really stepping into leadership is about having that clear idea about who you are and what's okay and what you want. And not getting caught up in all those other pressures and expectations, but figuring out your own version.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. Also, we often talk about self-awareness uh, on our podcast. It's such a unique and very crucial aspect of personal growth.
Mm.
Whether it's connected to any aspect, physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual as well. So how does uh, what kind of role self-awareness play in the core energy coaching process, and how do you help clients develop this quality?
Well, yes, self-awareness is absolutely the first step. So there are two parts in the way that I work. The first being, so doing this ELI that I described, so this way of measuring kind of where are we right now in terms of the energy that's showing up every day in all of the different things that we do. And then, as you mentioned, there's then this other way, once that's kind of clear, of looking at life through these 4, I call them energy sources. So physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And then really exploring those and understanding how they work for us, which again, there are things which are kind of common for everybody. And there are things that are unique to each person. And yes, the first step of that is really becoming aware. So how is my physical energy actually affecting my day in terms of how much sleep I had, what I've been eating, how much exercise I've had, and so on. If I am needing a lot of mental energy, perhaps for the job that I'm doing, I need to be able to concentrate, to focus, to analyze. Well, what is it that works and doesn't work for me to boost that energy? And going back to that book I mentioned earlier, it describes these different things as muscles, and they're muscles that can be trained. So under this awareness question, once we realize how those different areas work for us, we can start looking at, okay, well, how can I increase my capacity for my mental energy? And then the spiritual energy is the amazing one, because that's really the sort of big engine for all of us. I mean, that's all about purpose, values, what am I doing and why? And when we really become aware of what's most important to us, using that to then help us do the different things that we want to do is just a complete game changer. So yes, that awareness is really, really key. And then bringing that into the way we do what we do is completely transformative.
Agreed, Mary. Lovely, lovely. Also, what advice, as you have been open about your own journey of self-discovery, what advice would you give to someone who's just starting their journey of self-discovery and they feel overwhelmed?
Well, it's true that, yes, the first thing is it's fantastic to even begin the journey. A lot of people don't even start. So I think that's an important thing to recognize. And of course, it can be overwhelming. Once we start learning things and raising some awareness about what's going on, it can feel very overwhelming. Oh my goodness, I was better off not knowing even before. And yes, just, people say it a lot, but just, being kind to ourselves, and it sounds straightforward, but often it isn't. It's just say, okay, so this is where I am now. It's not easy. It's uncomfortable. I feel overwhelmed. Okay. Well, that's already a lot, that awareness and understanding. And then it's okay, well, what can I now perhaps start doing about that? And that's where it could be reading books. It could be working with a coach. It could be just spending time by yourself. It's amazing as well how, for a lot of us, how difficult that can actually be. But it's amazing also how that re-energizes us if we use that time to kind of disconnect from what's happening and just kind of open our minds. So there are many approaches, but it's normal to feel overwhelmed. We can only do, with everything we've learned and experienced so far, we can only do what we're doing now. Then the question is, well, where would I like to go? So what can I actually do to help me sort of get out of this overwhelm and into something different? And yes, there are all sorts of avenues to explore there, but I would say get support. I mean, there's so many, between books, between coaching, between things that we can find online. There's so much information that can be helpful. So just explore and enjoy the journey, I would say, is the other thing. Detach a little bit from the destination and explore the process and see what happens.
Definitely. And also any practical ways, Mary, just, to start maybe the first steps, the baby steps for people align their energy with their goals and values?
Yes, a couple of things. So on the awareness side, so for this, I actually have a tool, which is on my website that people can use. And that just gives a very first little, and it's completely free, a little indicator of how your energy is currently working in those different areas that we mentioned. So spiritual, mental, physical, and emotional. So it's a great place to start to get a little bit of an idea of what's happening. So that's on my website, which I'm sure will be published with this. So it's www.resonance.coach. So that's a great place for a first kind of taste of, okay, well, what's happening, and seeing what comes out of that that little energy assessment, which perhaps just one thing as well is not to try to start with too many things at once. Which one of those areas is one that I might like to start exploring? And yes, the one which definitely has the most impact, but which can take a bit more time, is definitely the spiritual area. So start looking at, what's most important to me, what are my values, and how are those actually translated into actually how I'm spending my time every day. And that can be such an eye-opener.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Well, it's great to hear how aligning energy with one's goals can lead to a greater sense of fulfillment. And I think our listeners will definitely find this perspective very, very valuable, Marian. Finally, if they wish to explore more about core energy, leadership coaching, and also connect with you, how they can do that.
Yeah, so as I mentioned just before, so I have a website, so that's probably the easiest way. So it's www.resonance.coach. So resonance, because I'm all about energy and vibration and resonating. And on there, yes, there is the questionnaire that I mentioned, which is a way of just giving you a little flavor about coaching. But also on there, you can find things about the workshops that I run. So I run workshops every month on different themes online, and also about coaching and coming and doing some one-to-one coaching and taking the whole process a little bit further to see how energy leadership coaching can actually work for you.
Lovely, lovely. We'll have all the details mentioned in the show notes for our listeners. And Mary, thank you so much for sharing your personal journey, your wisdom, as well as the insights with all of us today. And really, I found it such an enlightening conversation. And I'm very, very sure our listeners have gained a lot from it. And they are, on the path to now explore more about core energy leadership coaching. So thank you so much, Mary, for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
Listeners, for all of you who are tuning in, remember that understanding and harnessing our core energy, it can really lead to profound personal and professional growth. That's what we got from the conversation today with Mary and the success story and the insights she shared with all of us today. And if you are interested in diving deeper, be sure to check out Mary's website and a free giveaway, her coaching test, and also her services. You can refer all the links in the show notes along with this episode. And thank you to everyone for joining us on this journey towards a more mindful and fulfilling life. If you enjoyed this one, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends, your colleagues, your loved ones, anyone. And let's spread the message that energy and fulfillment are within everyone's reach. Until next time, take care and keep striving for that mindful journey. Thank you.